Well, I'm joined now from California by Heather McDonald from the centre-right American think tank, the Manhattan Institute. And in the studio here by Ali Dizaei, one of the most senior Muslim officers in the Met and the legal advisor of the National Black Police Association. Ali Dizaei, most moderate, peace-loving Muslims would have no problem being stopped, no problem being searched if it thwarted major murder plots of which they too could be victims.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with passenger profiling. In fact, it's been in existence since 1994. It was experimented by American Airlines. It is, as long as it's based on real intelligence, for example, travel history, how the ticket was purchased, the vulnerable destinations and the persistency of people going to those destinations. It becomes hugely problematic when it's based on ethnicity, religion and country of origin.
But realistically, what is the point of targeting everyone at security, Chelsea pensioners, toddlers, French exchange pupils, as if they were all likely to be terrorists, as likely to be terrorists? It's political correctness getting the better of us, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a stereotypical image of a terrorist. I mean, Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma bomber, would have certainly gone through the security system because he was a white male, and so would have John Walker Linder, who, if you remember, was born in Washington, went to Afghanistan and trained as a Taliban fighter. Now, clearly, we cannot simply lose sight of the fact that terrorists come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Even more recently, for example, if you look at the Chechnyan criminals who portrayed they were Muslims, they were all white, none of them were Arabs, none of them were Asians, and they caused atrocities to theatres and schools in Chechnya, and in fact there were women too amongst them. So those issues are really very important to bear in mind.
Heather McDonald, what does a terrorist look like?
Well, we're not talking about all terrorists right now. We're talking about Islamic terrorists, Emily. And it is not just statistically overwhelmingly true that the vast majority of Islamic terrorists have been young men from South Asia, North Africa, or Middle Eastern countries. It is also a logical tautology. I think that Ali's real gripe is with Osama bin Laden. I heard somebody say that this is racist. Osama bin Laden is the biggest racist. Until he calls on Jews and Catholics to join his jihad against Westerners and Americans, it is only logical and necessary for the police to look at Islamic people, because that is who Osama bin Laden has been calling upon to kill Americans.
It's still disingenuous, though, as Ali Dizaei was explaining, to assume that we know what Islamic terrorists look like. We don't. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, was white. One of the suicide bombers in London on 7/7 was a Jamaican-born convert. We don't know what a Muslim or an Islamic terrorist looks like anymore.
Emily, I think that those are the outliers, and you have to use generalizations in law enforcement. If we had an infinite number of police resources, it would be fine to look at every single person identically. The fact is, though, is that I would say 95 to 97% of successful and intending Islamic terrorists have fit the profile of young Muslim men from a certain origin in the world. And again,
I don't know where those. I certainly don't know where those figures. I don't know where those figures come from.
We simply can't afford that.
Let me just bring in Ali Dizaei.
I don't know where those figures come from. What I can tell you that they are fundamentally skewed. What you are suggesting is that we should have a new offence in this country called travelling whilst Asian. That's unpalatable to everyone. It is communities which defeat terrorism, and what we don't want to do is actually alienate the very communities who's going to help us catch terrorists.
But we're talking about using intelligence, aren't
we? Yeah, and we can use intelligence, and the way someone looks like is clearly not intelligence. What my friend across the Atlantic is saying is, look, ignore me and my son and suspect me and my son, and that clearly cannot be the way that we move forward.
You are alienating a community.
If we were talking about if we're alienating, it's because Muslim leaders are not willing to say this is not a criminal offense. Having a possibly extra level of scrutiny in addition to behavioral characteristics is hardly a criminal offense. It is an inconvenience compared to the massive possible tragedy that we're trying to avert of thousands of deaths.
You can't have it both ways.
I submit that Ali would not believe that if a Muslim shrine was bombed... Excuse me, can I finish, Emily?
Please.
I really doubt whether if a Muslim mosque was bombed, Ali believes that we should be searching the Muslim population in London for suspects. Again, it is not logical. It is not based on empirical evidence. If we have a Ku Klux Klan bombing in the South of a Baptist church, I think it would be absurd to be looking for blacks as possible suspects. Let's use our intelligence about this.
Would say this. I mean, John Stevens, the former Met Commissioner, has said the Muslim community must accept Islamic terrorist is their problem. And politicians are pandering to this state of denial. It is about common sense at the end of the day. We have to make generalisations if we want to make this country safer.
Clearly it is about the common sense, but it's not about saying to the victims of this very problem. And remember, the Muslim community is also a victim of this problem, and many of the people who were killed on the 7th of July were in fact
so
Muslim.
Wouldn't they welcome this?
No, no, it's not, because the question is, what you're saying is that you are the victims, you go and sort it out. And that's no dissimilar to saying to women who are victims of domestic violence, you know, you're a victim of domestic violence, you should go and sort it out yourself. It's a collective responsibility. Can I just finish? It's a collective responsibility which all stakeholders, including the government and Muslim leaders, should take on course. And the current issue at the moment, in terms of what Ruth Kelly doing, in terms of community consultation and reaching out to young Muslim youth, must be the way forward. And simply creating this offence of travelling whilst Asian will not work in this country and would alienate the very community that we need on board to defeat terrorism.
Emily, this is absurd rhetoric. To compare rape to having a possible extra level of scrutiny before boarding an airplane, which is a minor inconvenience, I think is absurd. These are not mutually exclusive solutions. Of course, there should be outreach to the Muslim community. We would love to hear more denunciations by Muslim leaders against Islamic terrorism, but in the meantime, let the police use all the available evidence that they have at their fingertips, and right now it is overwhelming that the majority risk that we face is from a certain subset of the population, and that's where our resources should be targeted.
But this is still very unsophisticated, isn't it? Terrorists can change their profile. They can recruit disenfranchised females. They can wear a suit. They can shave a beard. They can order an alcoholic drink. It doesn't take rocket science to change what you're doing.
Of course they can. How many times have they succeeded in that?
Just answer that point. Go on.
Can I just say the idea of thinking that a potential terrorist is going to walk through Heathrow Airport praying and smelling of rosewater is clearly absurd. They are far more cleverer than that. They will masquerade in different phases, and there's even the potential that they may coerce other innocent people to carry out that atrocities. As law enforcement agencies, we've got to be smart around.
Heather, last one.
Emily, let me just ask, do you think that the Metropolitan Police, after the 7/7 bombings or the failed 7/21 bombings, when they were canvassing the videotapes in the subway stops and bus stations, do you think that they were looking for freckled-faced Irish lassies? You know what? Everybody that they showed us fit a certain profile, and that was absolutely the right thing to do. If there is another bombing in air, do you think that we're going to be going to Catholic churches looking for suspects? We are going to be looking at the radical mosques in London and in Luton to try and find the suspects, because that is where the threat is coming from.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there. Thank you both.